anyone who's beating themselves up for not building. Go easy on yourself. You only have a finite amount of mental energy in a given day. What is up, plastic addicts? Welcome back to the SciFi Model Podcast. Previously, I've talked about my origin story, why I'm here, why I have Jason's Model Shop, why am I doing a podcast. In the second episode, talked about round 2 and my feelings on their, at least their sci-fi model side, and the good and the bad, and why this and not this, etc., etc. I've had a feedback from a couple followers about things to talk about. And motivation came up as one. Not a lot of people asked about it, but it made me think about times that I didn't build because it was just overwhelming. Where you're like, okay, I want to build the model, but I've got to do this and 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 this. It feels like it's too much, so you just don't do anything at all. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That overcoming it, understanding why it exists in the first place, and how it affects different people differently. So let's get into it. So this may not be a particularly long episode. And that's okay, because not every episode has to be an hour long or half. And on that note, I do plan on keeping the timelines within, ideally, the hour range. And if it goes long, split things up into 2 episodes, depending on the content and who I'm talking to. Having said that, let's talk about it. Let's get into it. The motivation thing is an interesting one, because a lot of it has to do with energy. And depending on your life circumstance, whether you're look at wealthy, middle class, working poor, whatever the case may be, will determine how much energy you have left at the end of the day. And that will impact your ability to build and your motivation to build, because even though you want to, ideally this is a leisure activity. Something to unwind after a long day of work, but odds are, if you're socioeconomically, higher up the ladder, you have more free time and less mental load. Home tasks can be shared, or subbed out, whatever the case may be. But you're working class, you get up. Also, having children is dependent on that and their age. So you get up, get ready for work, get yourself fed, get the kids fed, get them on the bus, drop them off school, whatever the case may be. You go to work all day, and kind of give away the best hours of your day. Come home, pick up kids, get them off the bus, make dinner, laundry, chores, etc. Come 9 o'clock, you're like, okay, I'm ready to build, and you sit down and look at your desk. And it's just pieces. Pieces. And you just end up scrolling on your phone instead. Because it's overwhelming, because not the nature of the pieces, but what you have left to give energy-wise to devote to the things you want to. And let's face it, even, 2-day weekend may not be enough. You have a bit more free time, but it comes back to laundry, groceries, other responsibilities. Because you need to maintain those social relationships to be, kind of a full and complete person. And you can get a good bit of that through online engagements, through the model making community, where you can engage with others, and that actually does help. But before I get into the rest, I do want to say that anyone who's beating themselves up for not building, go easy on yourself. You only have a finite amount of mental energy in a given day. There's a phenomenon called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is the idea that after making many decisions, your ability to make more and more decisions over the course of the day becomes worse. Now, you get through your day and you do all the stuff, and then sit down at your workspace. You don't get anything done, because where do I start? So that's another decision. Okay, am I going to paint? Decision. Am I going to glue? Decision. Am I going to sand? Decision. Am I going to modify parts? Decision. And over the course of your day, you have given up a lot of that mental energy to just your daily and work tasks. And so that's why it's important to understand that don't beat yourself up. You only have so much to give, and as much as you may want to build the help unwind, sometimes you just can't. And that's unfortunate state of affairs, but that's a bigger conversation about our society and how it's set up. There's a lot of aspects to motivation. It's not just the idea to get going. Once you decide that you're going to do it, you actually have to do it. That's where discipline comes in. The ability to just sit down and do it. But when you tie that all back to decision fatigue and just general fatigue, it's not as simple as discipline. I mean, you can be reductive and say, well, just have the discipline to do it. But it's more than that, because modeling requires a number of executive functions. Creative, and it's practical, and, hand-eye coordination, fine motor skills, and all these bits and pieces. So you can just say have the discipline to do it, but that reduces it to something less than it is. The other aspect about motivation is sometimes it doesn't come first. And I think a lot of people view it as, well, I'm not building because I don't have the motivation. Okay, but sometimes motivation follows action versus the other way around. You have the motivation. The idea in your head is, I've got the motivation to do it, and I'm going to take the action to do it. But then you don't. And I think a lot of people can sympathize and empathize with that. But you need to flip it on its head. And essentially, from the discipline aspect, force yourself to start. Just pick a thing to start with and take the action, and then motivation will follow. It's similar to, bodies in motion want to stay in motion, bodies at rest want to stay at rest. So yeah, you might have the idea, I want to build, but if you don't have the motivation to overcome all the other things, then you need the discipline to start the action, which will then lead to motivation. Because once you're moving, then your brain starts firing. It's like, hey, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I'm going to do all these things. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be wonderful. I don't remember where I read that, but for me it was a game changer, because there was a long period where I wasn't building because the state of just so many things need to be done. I mean, if anyone's built the 1350 refit, you know what I'm talking about. There are so many steps, and it becomes overwhelming, and you just tune it out and go do something else instead of doing the thing that you want to do, the thing that you want to love, or the thing that you love. Excuse me. Yeah, I want to, but then I can't. So what's the problem, brain? What's going on here? Why can't I do the thing I want to do? And there's so many things that impact your ability to self-motivate. But I think the other thing is you have to do it for the right reasons. Like anything, whether it's model making or any other thing, if you're doing it to get attention and accolades and just people cheering you on and telling you how awesome you are, it's unsustainable, because you can't operate with external validation only. You need to be able to do what you want, and the self-satisfaction is enough to carry you through. It doesn't have to be just self-satisfaction. It's like just accomplishing a goal you set out to do, any number of things. But the point is, doing things for the right reason also matters. So do it because you love it. I mean, look at, if you're part of communities, you should absolutely share your stuff, because you can impact and influence others. Ideally, in a positive way. Fairly recently, on one of the groups, someone had posted a build, and look, it wasn't great, but it was a 350 refit, and it was done and lit. For anyone who's in this, that is an accomplishment in itself. And the user had said that they kept their client in the loop the whole time, showed them pictures, the build progress. So at the end of the day, as long as their client, is happy with the results, then ultimately that's all that matters. Now, from a perspective of, I'm a professional and this is professional work, is that a bit questionable? Absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess like anything, there's always levels of quality in any consumer product. But let's say someone is shopping around. And we'll go to a mid to high-end purchaser shopping around, and they're like browsing Facebook, and they come across this post, like, this is a professionally built enterprise. And they see it, and they actually look at it, and they're like, if this is the quality that I'm going to get for my money, then maybe I won't do it at all. So there are drawbacks to that. This is obviously getting a little sidetracked from the main conversation, but what it comes down to is don't be negative when it's not. Look at, okay, sidebar, there are people who need to be taken down a peg or two. People who reshare the same thing over and over and over and over again. And not just once. This is a little irritation of mine. You're on Facebook, you're a member of multiple groups, and the same person posts the same thing on 8 different groups at the same time. It just clogs up your feed. It's like, dude, meter that shit out. And yeah, so when someone who's kind of an always one-up man or is maybe a little too egocentric, maybe there's times to be forthright in your criticism. But I do believe that constructive criticism is important. Because without it, we can't grow and change and get better. Now, I do think most modelers look at something they've made, and they're their own harshest critics. So you're like, next time I'm going to change this, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change this. But as we go down this rabbit hole, that leads to the, well, why didn't you do that as you were going? We can't speak for other people. The fact is that sometimes just encouragement, regardless of the quality of the product, is very, very important. Because that does tie into motivation. Because if you build something that is not as good as what everyone else is making, and in your own head you're like, hey, well, this is my second model, and this is great. This is great. And everyone's like, that's a piece of shit. What are you even doing? Get out of here, kid. You got no future. That borders on gatekeeping, and it can keep people out of the hobby. They'll just they'll either how do I want to say it? They'll keep doing it but not share anything because they're embarrassed and don't want to deal with the negative harassment. Or they'll quit altogether. If viewing forms of giving criticism, just use your fucking head. And sometimes realize that, hey, yeah, this is pretty good. You did a great thing here. You finished the thing. You built a model from beginning to end. You added lighting. You did all the stuff to it. Sometimes, regardless of how pretty the outcome is the more important thing. And so this is talking about, I've kind of switched over to external validation and how it can affect motivation. But simply put, when something isn't perfect but it's done, don't be a dick. We don't want to demotivate people. We want to keep them moving forward and growing their skills and engaging with the community and being here to help one another, because that's the whole point of communities. Anyway, that was a little sidebar, just something that happened, and kind of just a weird little tangent. Because the truth is I don't have a whole lot to say about motivation beyond when you're not feeling it, just sit down and start. Choose one thing out of 1,000. Just one thing, no matter how small. Even if it's just cutting pieces off the tree and test fitting them. Because once you see that piece in front of you, that may just kick things into gear, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to stay up all night instead of going to work, and that's going to be a problem for work the next day. I think I said that wrong. Go to sleep, then go to work, but then be really tired. However I said it. You know what I mean. Just do it. Just sit down and start, and sometimes you got to force yourself to start, but I promise you, once you're rolling, look, unless things turn to shit, you break a piece, or you scratch the surface, and, or you mask and paint, and then you get all sorts of paint bleed, then maybe take a break and come back to it. Because in the stream of consciousness that this podcast has become, taking a break matters. And I've talked about this before, the 350 refit I'm doing right now. I am extremely fortunate because my client is extremely patient, because to do all the things I want to do on this thing for him, it's really taxing me, and I need to keep taking frequent breaks. And there are longer breaks than I would like, but when I come back to it, any problems I've had have been resolved. And I don't mean they've resolved themselves. It just means that, okay, I've cleared my head, I've walked away, I've done something else. Now I can come back to this fresh. And that's the other part of it too, is when you sit down and get started, and hopefully things go well, but if they don't go well, it is okay to put it down and walk away. Because when your brain isn't where you need it to be, you can get in your own way, and then please tell me there's other modelers out there who've smashed a complete model, or near complete model. because just you're doing this doesn't work out, and this doesn't work out, and this doesn't work out, and you're like, Hulk smash. Or maybe it's just me. Hasn't happened recently, but there's been more than one smashed model in the rearview mirror. And if you feel like you're getting to that point, stop, do something else, reset. And I guarantee a couple days you come back to it. Even if you're not motivated, sit down and just make the decision to start again. I guarantee whatever problem seemed insurmountable 2 days ago, you'll see a solution right in front of your face. I think the big takeaways are, separate from motivation, personal motivation, don't be a dick on groups and communities when it comes to motivation, and you don't have it. You want to, but you don't have it. And that's fundamentally the problem we're talking about. You're like sitting there watching TV or scrolling your phone like, I want to build. But there's so much to do. I don't know where to start. Just get up, go to your desk, pick something, and just start with that. And once you have momentum, the motivation will follow. I promise you the motivation will follow once you get going. But if you run into problems and you're getting angry and frustrated and you're not sure how things are going to turn out, it's okay to stop and walk away. Because the break and a fresh perspective a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week later will make all the difference. Actually, here's a good example. The 350 refit. The connecting neck under the torpedo bay, there is an area with etched detail. There's it's like a little box with 3 lines in it. It's the best way I can describe it. And when I assembled it and put it together and painted it, I forgot to re-etch the lines, because when you fill the joint and sand it, you lose some detail. I had forgotten to re-etch the lines. I'm like, what am I going to do? This is all assembled. What am I going to do with this? And I was trying to etch it through the paint, and the paint was still soft because there's a lot of light blocking. Like, even when you light block from the inside, there's areas that are hard to reach. So when you sand down from the outside, you can get light leaks again. So apply some light leak, then do your primer base coat over it again. Anyway, there ended up being a lot of paint in that area, and it was still gummy, so I couldn't etch it. I'm like, what am I going to do here? So I walked away and left it and came back to it. And what I did was I used my X-Acto knife, my hobby knife, and followed the outside line and basically removed the paint from this area at the bottom of the neck where it connects to the deflector housing, which brought me back down to bare plastic, which I was then able to re-etch, so get that detail back. Now I haven't repainted it yet. It still needs light blocking and repaint, but I've got to do a couple other spots on that anyway. And I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to paint it, like repaint it, and then do it's got a different color than the whole color on that spot. Whether I'm going to do that, or I'm going to see if I can find someone who can make me a single decal for that spot. When you get the double whammy of lack of motivation and things going to shit, it can knock you right out of doing it. So if it was hard to get started and then things go to shit, then take a break and come back to it. But in the lion's share of instances, you will start and progress well and achieve a bunch of things, and that'll be what you want. And it'll be good, it'll be great. Sometimes it'll turn to shit, but sometimes it'll turn to shit when you are motivated. Things just don't work out sometimes, or things break, or things don't fit, or you just make a stupid mistake. We've all been there. But main takeaway is, if you're wanting to start and you just can't start because the motivation isn't there, understand that motivation follows action, and in most cases isn't the other way around. So whether it's model making, or anything else, just take the plunge, just do it, and the rest will follow. The biggest thing that I learned was motivation follows action, not the other way around. So unless you're so fatigued that it's an impossibility, let discipline take over, take action, motivation will follow. I can't say that enough. Action, then motivation, action, then motivation, action, then motivation. And you know what? I think that's going to do it for me for today. It's, I said, the unscripted, just kind of stream of consciousness, things that have been on my mind, and how they all kind of connect together. And even those outliers about not being a dickhead on forums, it fits because of how it can impact other people's motivation. As always, it's been great talking to y'all. I hope you engage. Feel free to check out the SciFi Model Podcast Patreon. If you want to support the show, support me. I've set up a couple tiers and some rewards. But you know what? Even if you just follow the link in my link tree to it, check it out and give me feedback on what you like and what you don't like about the rewards. And let's make it catered to what's going to benefit people who want to support the show as much as possible. And as always, you can find me on all the social platforms at Jason's Model Shop. Well, not all, not Twitter. But yeah, Jason's Model Shop, almost everywhere. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the show, and remember to have fun, builders, because you're going to need it.